or sentiments. Popular views do not always lead to sound policies. Imagine if you have everyone at the table because you want to be inclusive, but lack credible data. We're holding a communion, not designing policy. It's also important for us to be humble, recognizing that we do not know all, and that the more that we can get, the better the final outcome. Humility is important. But the good news is that it comes naturally. You only need to be yourself. On the contrary, it takes some intentionality and mental energy to be arrogant, because no one was born raising their shoulders. Being calm also enhances your credibility. Overall, whether it is tasks of fiscal reforms, strengthening public institutions, expanding opportunity or fostering innovation, one truth remains: great outcomes require intentionality in design and sincerity of purpose in execution. So that leads me to the next subject about what should the blueprint for tomorrow look like. Our aspirations must become actionable steps and must be institutionalized as systems that ultimately serve the people. As we look ahead, what should our blueprint for transformative action look like? I have some ideas. First, we must prioritize inclusion and national interest over sectional or self-interest. This was a major issue we had to deal with and continue to contend with. Policies must be people-centric, not just statistics, and must be inclusive to incorporate various perspectives, ensuring that every voice is heard and every key stakeholder is included. Contending with the interests of groups and agencies shouldn't feel like an economic civil war, where in some cases some deploy even government resources to fight the reform of government that is meant to benefit all. Second, we must use credible data for policy, and I said this earlier on, but it's so important. One major shortcoming of democracy is that majority decides outcomes, which do not necessarily work when it comes to making sound policies. Just imagine that we decide as a country that we'll ask Nigerians whether they would like to pay taxes, and we will implement the outcome. I'm sure you know what the answer will be, and that answer will mean that we no longer have a country. So, in policy formulation, credible data and evidence should be prioritized over popular views. The biggest test for our democracy should be when people and businesses choose to live, work, and invest in our country, even when they have the option to do so elsewhere. Third, we must invest in people to build capacity and visionary leadership. No nation or institution can rise higher than the people who drive it. Education, innovation, health, and creativity are not luxuries. They are the foundation and building blocks for sustained progress. As I round off, let me share with you the call to action that I have. Dear policymakers, colleagues, distinguished gentlemen and ladies, and friends, we must remember that boldness is a renewable resource. The courage that transforms societies must be nurtured every day in what we say, how we think, act, and lead. Nations are made by the policies that they make. And not having a policy is in fact a policy itself, except that it's chaotic. It means we rule by discretion and we create uncertainties. To the elites, and I know I belong to that group, We must apply more intellectual rigor in policy debates, challenge long-held theoretical beliefs, question assumptions within context. We must avoid crowd-pleasing analysis because after the applause, the pain will remain. The government should focus on doing only what the private sector will not do and collect the least amount of tax in doing so without compromising. But it will be capital you are taxing. We must address regulatory overreach, embrace digitalization, particularly in government services, refine our tariff system to reduce the rates on raw materials and intermediate products, which currently are twice the average for sub-Saharan Africa. We make input costs too high. Addressing our tariffs and regulatory models is the equivalent of granting waiver from all income and consumption taxes. So this is a low-hanging fruit. We also need fiscal reforms to complement a strong and stable naira, such as payment of taxes in naira by Nigerian businesses who do not generate dollars. Despite having a comparable trade balance over the past 10 years as Kenya and South Africa, the Nigerian naira has lost 6 times more value than either the South African rand or the Kenyan shillings. This underscores the need for the fiscal, monetary, and other policies to work together for us to have a strong and stable naira. I'll close with gratitude and final words. My profound appreciation goes to Mr. President for the opportunity given to me to serve our dear nation along with my team members. And I have to put on record, Mr. President understands the reforms. Mr. President did not, up to this moment, dictate anything to our committee. Everything we proposed was a result of our debates, not perfect, but we were not influenced in any way. So I think we should appreciate Mr. President. I would also like to appreciate the Honorable Finance Minister and CMA, and my dear brother and friend in this mission, Dr. Zach Adedeji. I'd like to appreciate their excellencies, the governors, for their support, honorable ministers, distinguished senators, and honorable members, all members of the Presidential Fiscal Policy and Tax Reform Committee, our secretarial staff, and volunteers, including tax club students from 22 universities across Nigeria. And to the patriotic Nigerians who spent their hard-earned money, a Nigerian came to us and spent 15 million naira of his personal money. After we explained the reform to him, he couldn't understand why anybody was fighting them. He said, I'll help you translate to Yoruba, Pidgin, English, and Igbo. He did the interview and spent his money to do all those 15 million naira without asking for anything. And for those that don't have money but they applied other resources, including their time, to help us promote the reforms, we are grateful. To everyone who supported or opposed the reforms, your questions and critics made us better. The roles we played, the ideas, questions, collaboration, and guidance have enriched my path personally more than I could have imagined or ever hoped for. Words are insufficient to express my gratitude. Finally, today is not just about celebrating what has been, it is also about affirming what lies ahead. Let us move forward with boldness, wisdom, and hope. Rather than wait for the future, let's go out there and build it. Thank you very much for paying attention to me.
Please let's make it louder. Let's clap for more for him, please. Thank you. Now you see why it is better to hold the lecture on your birthday. Someone has said, if you do good, you pay something to government. If you do bad, you pay something to government. And I said, how? It was his definition of the difference between tax and fine. He said the tax is a fine for doing fine, and a fine is a tax for doing wrong. So either way, you pay something. May I especially welcome the Director General and Chief Executive Officer, the Chief IT Officer of Nigeria, Kashifu Inwa Abdullahi, CCID. Please put your hands together for me. Not easy to do IT these days, especially these days of AI. I was trying to open an email the other day and the AI was asking me to confirm if I'm a human being. I said, you confirm first if you are real. I also want to specially welcome the Registrar and CEO of Council of Registered Builders of Nigeria, Builder Adetoji Adeniro. Please put your hands together for him. He's here with his team. Thank you very much for the honor. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, before we move quickly into the panel, I want to especially appreciate the man who taught me English in the University of Abuja. He's at the back, he said I shouldn't call his name. But only 2 weeks ago, we had a conference where we were choosing which English language to select for Nigeria. We're trying to pick, should we take the American English or should we pick the British English? We have also with us, we have thank you very much. So, while at that conference we're trying to pick, like we are here today, for which English should pick for Nigeria. And it was difficult to pick between the British English and the American English. Because in Britain they will say extreme, in America they will say end, but here we will say extreme end. In Britain they will say maker. In America, they will say short, but here we'll say short maker. In Britain, they will say salon. In America, they will say barber shop, but here we'll say barbing salon. In Britain, they will say bend. In America, they will say corner, but here we'll say bending corner. In Britain, they will say so. In America, they will say therefore, but here we'll say. In Britain, they will say still. In America, they will say yet, but here we'll say still. In Britain, they'll say should. In America, they will say in case, but here we will say, in Britain, they will say henceforth. In America, they will say from now on, but here we will say from now. In Britain, they will say reverse. In America, they will say turn back, but here we will say reverse. In Britain, they will say tell me the reason. In America, they will say tell me why, but here we will say tell me the reason why. Please put your hands together. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, if you picture a media watchdog with sharp eyes and a moved perch on the edge of power, she is a centennial monitoring economic tides with the precision of a trained scientist and the poise of a spring goddess. And that's the person I'm about to introduce. At some point, she went to school. Her early education faced her of diligence and vision culminating in the BSc in parasitology and etymology from Nnamdi Azikiwe University. She started with parasites under the microscope. Now she dissects policies with the microphone and on the screen. Her tools have evolved. Once lab slides and field work, now broadcast as economic charts and policy white papers. But her analytical lenses never dulled. Today she wields the scientific discipline like a scalpel, cutting through noise in the role as journalist, presenter, and financial watchdog. She is the commanding voice behind the Money Show on AI2, with the poise of a panel queen and the instinct of a born interviewer. She has grilled titans of African economic leadership, including titans like Donald Kapudenka, John Kufuor, Adam Soshomole, Sanusi Lamido Sanusi, among others. Each episode is a surgical dive into economic, diplomacy, and development. Halloween. She's not just a broadcaster, she's a media mogul. As channel manager of Africa Business Channel Grassat and CEO of Africa Economic Congress, she monitors fiscal narratives and policy movements. She's across the continents and shaping them just as much as she reports them. To distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, permit me to welcome the multi-layered persona, fast scientist, fast centennial, fast spring goddess, a master interviewer with a velvet voice, a moderator of powerful panels, sharing conversations to shape Africa's economic future, and to crown it all, she holds the chieftaincy title of Adan Ekoli Uwa, bestowed by the Obi Judewa, king of Isili. Please put your hands together as I welcome Naz Inash. Please clap for her support.
Good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, excellencies. We are all here for Mr. Taiwo Oyedele's 50th, and just before I introduce our panelists, thank you very much, Mr. Oyedele, for the lecture, for that deeply insightful and thought-provoking lecture. Of course, it has sparked the right questions and setting the stage perfectly for what is next, for what we'll be doing in the next few minutes. Listening to your lecture earlier, the lecture, of course, reminded us that, in fact, as I was seated there, it reminded me that tax and fiscal reforms are not just technical adjustments, they are levers of transformation. You mentioned that boldness is not the absence of fear, policy must not be the most popular, and I felt a bit I wouldn't say perhaps, I felt a bit attacked as a journalist, because when any policy comes out, for us as journalists, we try as much as possible to bring different people on air, they criticize. You are also torn between, is the most popular voice the right voice? You also mentioned strengthening public systems, requiring boldness, intentionality, policy must be people-centric, credible data must be used for public policy, but most importantly, visionary leadership, as no nation rises without the people who drive it. From your lecture, we've seen where the gaps lie. We've unpacked the lessons from what you've said. And now the real challenge is not how we turn, how we turn like a deaf ear, but how we turn insights into impact. So now that the stage is set, we're shifting gears into this high-level conversation themed bold policies for prosperous future, pitfalls, lessons, and prospects. And I'm delighted to drive this panel session. Like the MC had mentioned, I am Nancy Naji, the executive producer and anchor of Moneyline with Nancy on AIT. So this next session is about the bold moves. It's about the strategic pivots, clinical execution, most importantly, and leadership to push reforms beyond paperwork into real and measurable progress. And each of the panelists I will be introducing shortly here brings a distinct lens, I must say, of how policy can be a catalyst for industries, institutions, and society. So let me just get right in. Our first distinguished panelist is at the heart of Nigeria's trade and investment reform efforts. She brings a policy lens into productivity and competitiveness. Please welcome Dr. Jumoke Oduwole, MFR, our Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment. Please, a round of applause for her. Thank you. Our next panelist, when she came into the room this morning, I was just looking at her, and it got me thinking that coordinating bold reforms across government is not easy, but it's essential, especially when bold ideas risk dying in committee rooms. She's responsible for connecting the dots, driving deadlines, and making policy happen. Please welcome our next panelist to help us unpack what boldness in implementation really demands. Ms. Hadiza Bala Usman, Special Advisor to the President on Policy and Coordination. Please make it louder. Our next panelist will be offering external insights on internal economic realities. I must prepare your minds that he will bring tough love to this panel, but trusted data, context, and clarity also to this panel. Please help me welcome Dr. Christian Ebeke, IMF resident representative in Nigeria. Please, another round of applause for him. Our final panelist for today is bridging government, business, and civil society, I must say. Private sector, I call him a private sector policy whisperer. He's helping push policy beyond conversation. Please welcome Dr. Taiwo Adeloju, CEO, Nigeria Economic Summit Group, NESG. And I'm seeing him differently today. I was chatting with him earlier. I said, I'm seeing you on a suit today. What's happening with a golden tie? You're honoring Mr. Oyedele. Please welcome him to the panel. All right, I think we'll delve right in. And my first question will be to all of you. And I'll start with the Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment. And I would appreciate that we do this very quickly. So 2 minutes answers. What is one bold move, policy bold move of this administration? What was done well and what could have been done better? So Minister, over to you.
One bold move, I think charity begins at home. But first of all, I know you said 2 seconds, but happy birthday, Taiwo. I couldn't make it here in time for the goodwill message, so please let me just say to everyone publicly, Taiwo has been a leading supporter since my days at the Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council. From his PwC days, we actually started with a big fight of his rating Nigeria negatively on tax reforms. But he didn't stop there with just negative commentary. He became an avid supporter to fix those reforms, and over the years we've worked very closely together for about a decade. So I just wanted to publicly commend and recommend and recognize that effort. And we know that the best is yet to come. So thank you, Taiwo. Now, what has the administration done well? Well, I would start with being responsive and not reactive. And I will go straight to trade policy, taking a deliberate position on accelerating and diversifying the economy through non-oil exports, and specifically leveraging the African Continental Free Trade Area. That policy or that agreement, making it the mainstay of our trade policy, has seen a 24% increase in non-oil exports year on year for Nigeria, and has shown incredible potential for our non-oil exporters, in particular across the continent. So that is going well. What has the administration not done well, or what can we do better? Let me stay with the same theme. Coordination of the AfCFTA ecosystem, a lot had been happening. And so in terms of coming together with a synergy, that could have been done better. And immediately we started doing that better. I'm glad the CG of Customs is here, many other stakeholders. People were doing important work in a bit of silos, and so we have the Central Coordination Committee for AfCFTA implementation. I'll just stay with that one example. What was the last thing? Okay, excellent, thank you.
I would also start with happy birthday, Taiwo. We're very proud of you. I'm part of a cohort with Taiwo, Nigerian Leaders Initiative, from 2006, I think, and I'm so proud to see the journey, and I'm so proud of the work you've done. Happy birthday. Regarding the question on the policy that I think the government has done well, is the Nigeria First policy. That is a long time incoming policy which recognizes that Nigeria needs to own and spend things for itself. Nigeria needs to prioritize what it produces, and in that way we can expand our manufacturing sector, we can expand and self-promote ourselves. One of the things that I felt was not done in the right way regarding the policy speaks to the fact that there had been existing trust in that regard. There have been historically executive orders that spoke to prioritizing the procurement of Nigerian products. There have been several types of First Nigeria initiatives that have been announced, that have started. So we need to look at what went wrong, how were we unable to have that Nigeria First being implemented in the last few years, that initiative has been done. So I think looking back and ensuring that anytime you're proposing a policy, you need to walk back to see what has been done before, what went wrong, how do we fill the gaps to ensure that this initiative and this policy is actually done properly and is actually achieved, recognizing the whole of government approach, looking at where the gaps exist, looking at where the owners are, who dropped the ball in the 2017 executive order that spoke to prioritizing made in Nigeria products. Where in the Public Procurement Act did we review of the Public Procurement Act, did we recognize government spending to prioritize made in Nigeria products? So all of this did exist, but where did we drop the gap? So doing a Nigeria First policy now without walking back to look at those gaps, to me, is what may have challenged the implementation or the perceived announcement of that policy.
What could we have done better?
What would have done better is to come up with looking at what didn't work when the policy was announced. We had an executive order on this, is the first time it's been done. Where was the ball dropped that we did not achieve what we sought to achieve in the first outing of such a policy that spoke to prioritizing procurement, prioritizing the use of made in Nigeria products? So I think these are the things, if we had looked to come up, see those gaps. So in implementing the new policy, the first thing to do would be to plug those gaps and ensure that there's a whole of government approach in that. And also there's a compliance issue, meaning non-complying agencies, MDAs, that do not comply to those directives and those executive orders that spoke to prioritizing made in Nigeria products will now be penalized, will be sanctioned. So I think, to me, those elements need to be done. And yeah, it's not too late to actually do them. So we need to walk back a bit, pull out all those gaps, ensure that there's compliance, ensure that there's sanctioning for non-compliant MDAs. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Baker, the same question. One bold policy move of this administration that was done well, and what could have been done better?
Right. Thanks again, Taiwo, for the invitation. I think you could have invited many other people, but you choose to invite the IMF, including myself. So thanks again and happy birthday. It's difficult to just take one bold policy that the administration has done. I think it will not do justice to what they have.
You're still on to Channels Television as we continue with our live broadcast of this event taking place from the Continental Hotel Abuja, the Presidential Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms Program that is also marking the 50th birthday policy lecture of the chairman of the Presidential Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms, Mr. Taiwo Oyedele. It's an interesting panel that has set out with reflections on the policies of these, the current administration of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. We've seen the very rich panel of advisors and cabinet members of this administration that have begun talking to us about the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, Nigeria First policy, and of course, there will also be recommendations as we project ahead of their conversation, recommendations on what can be done better to implement, to execute these policies in order to get more results in the near future rather than later. We'll return to the Continental Hotel Abuja now for a continuation of this program. It's the policy lecture marking the 50th birthday of the chairman of the Presidential Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms. Stay on with us.
Accelerating, the budget deficit is coming down, FX reserve are up, the naira is more stable, etc. But those gains are yet to benefit the average Nigerians. This, I mean, if somebody tells you otherwise, they're not telling you the truth. There is immense hardship. You know, the population is really, really struggling. We have data on poverty, on food insecurity. So I believe that the next step, or probably the urgency for the administration, will be to really fast track and accelerate whatever mechanism that they have. Now that they're creating the space for more fiscal activism, it will be very important to ensure very quickly that the gains that we are seeing at the macro level are translated into micro gains so that the average Nigerian can now understand what this policy package was all about.
Thank you very much, Dr. Beke. I told us earlier that he's going to bring tough love to the panel, and he's doing that already, telling us some of the things that we need to do better. All right, I come to you, Dr. Aduloju. Say your question.
So first, Taiwo, Mr. Chairman, like I call him, happy birthday. I'm wearing the gold tie I promised you. Welcome to the golden years. And thank you for being a fantastic representative of the NESG community. People do not know, but Taiwo was our first fiscal policy commissioner at the NESG, or Fiscal Policy Roundtable. That process birthed the most statistically significant study on citizen perception on taxation in Nigeria, which gave us for the first time a very deep set of lenses that allowed for some of the work that we could front load when the reforms started in terms of understanding what to do that the citizens wanted. He also served as chairman of the Debt Management Roundtable for the whole of West Africa. Thank you again for representing Nigeria well. And so as national practice leader for fiscal policy at the NESG, you can imagine that when the president gave this assignment, we just said to ourselves, all of us must jump in. And we are honored and inspired by the leadership you've brought to this very complex reform. Happy birthday, my brother. This is a very bold government. So when you discuss one bold reform, you can point to several bold reforms. Subsidy removal was historically unprecedentedly bold. removal of historic FX, multiple FX rates, with foregone premiums up to 65–70% was historically bold. So I think the president is a very bold reformer. And I think we need to celebrate that in Mr. President. You can give him a hand if you want, but I think you should. And I think that that's the first thing we noted about Mr. President, his boldness on the issues of balancing the current account. And that has, like Kristen pointed, many things in it. The second thing was that Mr. President was bold in giving the Presidential Committee on Fiscal and Tax Reform this very strange assignment without boundaries. When I saw the terms of reference, I think I went over to Taiwo's office, he was still in PwC. I said, are you sure the president wants to do this? Are you very, very sure that he wants us to go all the way? And he gave me some assurances. I said, well, I said we will see. Because the terms of reference looked almost impossible to execute. So what has gone well? Mr. President has deployed to the fiscal and tax reform an immense amount of political capital. And political capital manifests itself in at least 6 ways. The first is he was in front of it, all the way. Whenever we needed Mr. President to make a clear statement on the reforms, he was there. Number 2 is that it was backed by authorization to the critical institutions to support it. And Dr. Zach, thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, for just, he was in the room huddling, especially when the political dynamics started to shift in interesting ways. And in fact, when it looked as if the political headwinds would not be in favor of the policy, Mr. President was in front of his reform also. I think that's important to note. But the third thing about reforms is that you have to authorize a group to do serious work and get out of their way. I think Mr. Oyedele mentioned this, that one of the things the president did not do was to send us any, yellow notes on his interest. We worked for a year and a half plus with zero interference from Mr. President. And I think that's important. So let's give him a hand, because political authorization is one thing to say, do it, something else to authorize it to happen. The fourth was an immense amount of allocation of resources. We had all the institutions, CG, thank you so much. CG's most senior people were in the room, Fiscal Responsibility Commission. I think this is one reform where the chief executives were on board, they were in the room, they were on their beats, and therefore it naturally had the last component maybe to note in terms of what worked well: immense institutional coordination. Now, coordination did not mean we agreed. One of the lessons of this reform is coordination does not mean agreement. Coordination means that we accept we must get the outcomes we want, but there might be disagreements. One of the things I learned from these reforms, and I think it's an important improvement going forward, is that overlaps are not opportunities for conflict. In reform, overlaps are opportunities for collaboration, for partnership, for understanding ourselves better, and for finding a way that works for all of us. And those, I think, are important lessons going forward. In terms of what has not worked well in terms of the bold reform, it will be coordination, 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 coordination. And I think there are many lessons from this reform that we can apply to other reforms across Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think, banking on that, let me come back to Ms. Bala Usman, because since we're talking about coordination, boldness, the question to you would be, what leadership qualities really make the difference between a great policy idea and a great policy impact? And let me also ask this, dovetailing from what Dr. just mentioned, can boldness sometimes backfire in policy making? How do you strike the balance?
I think we have an example of that in Nigeria. Currently, Mr. President is very bold and visionary, and his boldness and ability to understand how to implement drive policies, recognizing the boldness and also being strategic, I think that's important. I would also want us to look at an example in the way the tax reform bill, again, the policy that conceptualized that. So the way the chairman, so you have two people, you have Zach and Taiwo, both of them being able to work together to showcase boldness, to showcase being strategic, to showcase collaboration. So the first question that spoke to what leadership qualities would get you a policy and then a policy impact. So boldness, being strategic, understanding collaboration, and they typify that. So you have boldness in what Zach, the chairman of FRS, has been doing. You see strategy in what he's been doing. You see collaboration in what he's been doing. So so the definition of how you can do policy, the leadership traits that are required, policy impact, how to get it. I think what the government has been able to achieve within the tax reform is really an example of how it can be done. Taiwo is providing technical content, able to drive and ensure that the strategies are there, the boldness and conviction and sector collaboration. And of course, you mentioned how will boldness, is it a negative backfire? I think you must be bold to drive reforms and bring policy. So boldness, to me, I'm one of the very bold ones. So I'm an advocate for being bold and being strategic. So the strategic aspect of being bold is the fact that is where you have I say a synergy that would enable you mitigate the pushback you will get within a bold and visionary idea. So recognizing how to manage it, what to do to streamline and coordinate the strategies needed for you to embark on. So bold ideas and bold policies do backfire, but recognizing what strategies to bring about to enable you address and conclude on those bold policies are important. And as I said, an example of it is what we have in Nigeria from the president, larger bold policies, strategies across the board, with his foot soldiers, bold and visionary, also able to recognize how to collaborate, when to collaborate, and how to ensure that those bold ideas are not lost in translation in trying to ensure that there's stakeholder collaboration. So stakeholder collaboration while also retaining the core of what you want to get done, not losing the essence of your policy reform under the guise of collaborating, under the guise of stakeholder relations, but ensuring that the bold initiative is continued and is delivered within the policy, and ensuring people understand the benefit of that boldness, the benefit of doing what you believe is the right thing to do, even if there may not be the larger understanding within that bold policy position. Thank you.
Okay, let me just stick with you for a few seconds. You've given us example with Mr. Oyedele. With your own experience, what leadership quality, just give me one, do you ensure that that comes through, especially when boldness? I imagine if you go to different agencies, you've got to do this, the president wants this. With your boldness, what one leadership quality comes through for you at that time to be able to be
strategic?
Okay.
Yeah.
Strategic. So
yes.
That same strategy.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Let's leave it at that. Dr. Becker, yes. Over to you, Dr. Becker. Looking into the next 5 to 10 years, I want to talk about innovation. Where do you see the biggest opportunity in our country in terms of transformative policy for the next 10 to 5 years? And if you had to design, one policy blueprint for the future, what would be your first principle?
All right. It's a great question. And it also helps me to kind of, preview a little bit what we will disclose on Monday. And, it's because of Taiwo, I can go, off the record and basically share a little bit what will be the IMF positions about the future of Nigeria for the next 5 to 10 years. And this will be published on Monday, June 23rd here in Nigeria. So the greatest opportunities the country has now is that the runway has been cleared, right? Nigeria is ready for takeoff. That is without any doubt. This country is ready to grow. This country has created the oxygen it needed by really removing the key bottlenecks and by allowing the fiscal to be even more transparent, by allowing monetary policy to refocus on the core principle of ensuring that the Naira and inflation are pretty stable and the market is functioning well. So when you have these preconditions set, what are then the opportunities for the country to grow here? Where is growth going to come from? I think it's very important to first start with what the needs are. The needs is that Nigeria needs to grow durably. Okay, so that's the first precondition. Second, the growth has to be very strong. You know, at 3%, 4% is still not strong enough to deal with the type of poverty and food insecurity the country faces. Third, this growth has to be balanced across the country. You know, regional disparities in Nigeria, unfortunately, have risen. It's very important that this growth is inclusive, including geographically. So in the Article 4, what we are calling for is really continuing on the course where we are now. There's an opportunity now with the fiscal reforms that are being done, with monetary policy and FX, and the fact that the Naira is pretty cheap compared to other currency, to really engineer a productive, you know, like a social contract that is productive enough. Let me explain. As I mentioned earlier, Nigeria needs to raise more revenue to spend more. If there is something you have to remember from the IMF position, is to raise revenue and spend on Nigerians. Okay? So the flow of funds is really very simple, and I think Taiwo explained it very well. There are gaps into health, education, infrastructure, agriculture, etc. So any fiscal effort that is being done has to come back very quickly into spending on those productive sectors. To sustain growth durably, the only thing you need is productivity. And you cannot achieve productivity when you face insecurity, when you face other bottlenecks. So a productive social contract where the Nigerians are placed at the center of the growth strategy, where growth is strong, but also growth trickles down and ensure that people have a decent job and living wages. This is the type of, you know, policies you need. You need an environment that will attract FDI. The country has received so far enormous amount of FPI, you know, short-term flows. And thanks to the stability that Nigeria is now enjoying, what we hope to see is now this conversion from FPI to foreign direct investment. This will ensure that the country will have the productive capital it needs in order to power growth. I think the second question was about, design one blueprint. Again, I will challenge you on that. The world now, with everything, all the uncertainty that we face, having one blueprint is a big mistake. What you need to have is agility. You need to be agile, but you need to have a direction. But in that road, you need to have a lot of exits. So you can take corners, you can pause at a certain point, but you need agility to make sure that you can recalibrate your policy very, very quickly. Let's say you have, for example, an oil price shock, permanent decline in oil prices. The question will be to Mr. Zak and Mr. Taiwo, given the decline in oil prices, and if it's permanent, is that putting us at risk in terms of achieving the 18% of GDP tax to GDP revenue? What else can we quickly do now to take into account the new reality? So this agility is very important. Again, the objective of 18% is set. You know the direction. But what are you doing in the meantime to quickly recalibrate the strategy so that you don't lose sight of the objective? So in terms of policy blueprint, is really agility. You need to continue to build the buffers. Unfortunately, we live in a very strange world. And without buffers, if you don't count on yourself, it's becoming very, very difficult to be able to navigate these heightened shocks and compounded shocks. And then you need also to be able to communicate what you do to the population. When I discuss with many Nigerian policymakers, it's something that they have very, very clear in their mind. We are doing a lot of reforms. We have to make sure that we carry the population along, but by ensuring that they also understand what we're doing. In this digital world where misinformation is spread very quickly, you must be very, very strong on communication. And you need consistency. Even if it's repeating the same message all over again, that is what is going to help you make sure that the population understand where you're going. But, you know, let me stop here.
Thank you very much. Fantastic. So I had driving more revenue, agility, and communication. Thank you. Dr. Adiloja, I'll still pose the same question to you. Looking ahead, what transformative policy, and if you had to design a blueprint, what would that be?
Thanks. I think that looking ahead, Nigeria has to pursue the arc of the possible. Now, the arc of the possible is, I think Kristen got this right, it's growth, but it's a certain type of growth, right? It's growth that has one, solve for security, and there are three types of security to solve for. Energy security is crucial because you need to fire industries to produce at costs that are competitive for the African Continental Free Trade Area and for our export orientation advantage. You have food security. We need to solve for that because, of course, that allows us to bring down the cost of food. The second, non-monetary driver of inflation. And, of course, the third is national security itself because, of course, value chains and market systems are impacted by the shocks from security threats. So we need to invest in a scale of security operation response that matches the threats we face in different parts of the country. So that's key. The second is that we are now on an inevitable part of diversification, especially in terms of export diversification, especially non-oil earnings type export. And what that means in real terms is that both export in goods, products, and services must take front and center stage. And I think the Honorable Minister for Industry, Trade and Investment, I think, has echoed this severally as a key way to go. The third is productivity, because Nigeria per capita is a very unproductive country. The number of us contributing in terms of real productivity growth is very low. So we have to put Nigerians back to work. That requires a clear jobs plan that includes the public and the private sector agreeing that this is what it will take to absorb more people into the job market and determine what sectors will drive that. So labor-intensive, high elasticity job creation is essential for productivity. The fourth is technology. Because of the global competitiveness, it's impossible to discuss Nigeria's competitiveness without digital transformation competitiveness. And we need to see Nigeria achieve at least 80–85% broadband penetration so payment systems and services can reach more Nigerians more quickly. The last is growth that has the human capital indices driving it. So it's important to now put poverty reduction as a clear target for all sectors, job creation as a clear target for all sectors, improving average income and household consumption as a clear target. And some of the initiatives of government already doing so, so for instance, the conditional cash transfers improve consumption for the poorest households. But at scale, you can't use social investments to solve scale problems, right? You must put more Nigerians to work more quickly. And that's only going to happen if investments, at Kristen's point, goes to productive sectors, they expand, and those expanded sectors now create more jobs for Nigerians. Now, government cannot do this alone. So one blueprint, one principle for a blueprint going forward is deeper conversations between public and private sector about which sectors must grow and how can we work together to make them grow. So for example, there's a big initiatives in government on food security, but I'm challenging private sector entities that how many of you can cultivate 1 million hectares of something, right? And if 10 of you can at scale do 10 million hectares of anything, that changes the dynamics on food productivity, for example. So we need to ask the private sector and the public sector to come along and look at the sectors for future growth and what we can do together to get going in those regards. That is what will be transformative. So, for example, when the Minister of Digital Economy noted that tariffs were going to shift up by 50%, the response of the private sector is, okay, we can do on our balance sheet scaling infrastructure by $3 billion in 2025, $4 billion. Those are the kind of conversations we must have across sectors where we are actively talking about the elements and the imperatives for growth. I think if you have that, so diversification, export orientation, deep productivity in services, manufacturing, technology upgrade, and a real focus on human capital. And by the way, because we leave too many people behind, human capital means we must put more young people to work. Our demographic transition means that Nigeria will be younger for longer. 65% of Nigerians are under the age of 35 today. By 2050, 70% of Nigerians will be under the age of 35. So we're not going to grow old as a country. So if you're thinking of the next few years, what that means is that our minds must shift to scale and speed. Scale, speed, and doing it together will get us there faster. And I think that those will be the elements that work.
Thank you. Please make it louder because we're getting a lot from this panel. Please, I also want to acknowledge the presence of the Honorable Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Chief Wale Adun. Thank you very much. You walked in one way. Thank you very much, sir. My next question is to the Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, Dr. Jumoke Oduwole. Thinking about your experience, your successes, the successes you've achieved, as well as even the challenges you faced, what's one critical lesson that you believe policymakers should not forget? You have to think about that.
Yes, I think perhaps the most important lesson is to have the courage to conclude what you start and to implement what you start. So we've had comments and they're really layering and aligning with each other. Hadiza talked about being strategic. We've talked about coordination and the need to really finish and learn from past experiences. And I say this across both private sector and public sector. So as a country, as a nation, how do we have the courage to deliver to the last mile what we already know? We have good plans, we have some level of implementation, coordination, but that missing ingredient that we individually and collectively should remember is that what we do counts, and we should have the courage to finish what we start.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Now my final question to all of you, and that question will be, in one or two sentences, I want it to be very brief, but very sharp, as we end on a very high note. I would want you, and I will start with the Honorable Minister, I want you to tell us what will define successful policies for the next generation, and your closing thoughts.
My closing thoughts would just be to amplify the digital trade policy of Mr. President. He's digital co-champion for AFCFTA, and what that means and why he's prioritized it is because that is where Nigerian youth are competitive, that is where Nigerian youth are leading, not just Africa but the world. 50% of unicorns on this continent are of Nigerian extraction. And that policy, that focus, and just looking at where Nigerians will lead the world, it's really going to be in digital trade, in services. And so prioritizing that is a policy that he's led with, he started with, and it will serve us well. Thank you.
Ms. Usman, yes. The question will be, what will define successful policies for the next generation, and your closing thoughts?
My closing thoughts are on the need for a whole-of-government approach towards solving our national issues. The need for enhanced coordination, both within government, enhanced coordination, and also coordination with the private sector to ensure that we have a clarity of where we're going and we're all working in the same direction to achieve our objectives of an improved country as a whole. So our national development needs to have clarity on whole of government and a defined direction where all of us are working together. And I believe one of the important policy outcomes for the country is, as Jumoke has mentioned, the need for us to recognize our demography and target initiatives that specifically enhance their livelihood. We have a huge population of young Nigerians, and we need to be very mindful of recognizing those specific initiatives and policies that would move them out of continued poverty, and also recognize that conditional cash transfers, poverty elevation mechanisms do not achieve the larger result of ensuring that a strong economy is built.
Thank you very much. Doctor, same question.
Yeah, before I answer this, when we talk about successful policies, you know, if you just imagine with what is going on in the rest of the world now, the volatility, the shocks, just imagine that this administration hadn't done these reforms. Where would have been the Naira today? Where would have been the deficit today? So just think about this counterfactual. You know, we are going into a period of heightened volatility, sharp uncertainty, geoeconomic fragmentation, climate shocks and everything. Without the policies that were implemented, there were difficult policies and a lot of people do not understand these policies. We discussed this. But without these policies, the country would have been in a very, very tough situation. So this is a sign of success, is being forward-looking. I'm sure when they were implementing the policies, they didn't know that we will have this oil price volatility and then there will be war everywhere, etc. But because they did it, they are now in better position to be more resilient to those type of shocks. So now, what will be durable measure of success? I would say is just going back to the people, right? If Nigerians are not penalized because they are born in a certain region and therefore they don't have the same opportunity than someone born in another region, this is not success. You need to equalize the opportunities within Nigeria or across states so that everyone who wants to work more, who wants to set up a business can have these opportunities. You also need to make sure that basic needs, fundamental needs like food security are really addressed. And that's why I like the blueprint that my brother Taiwo said, agricultural productivity is a must. And, further measures, the administration has done a lot on, dry season farming and things like that is very important to continue. So success will be when Nigerians, on average, because not everyone will be happy, there is no country where everyone is happy, but on average, people feel like whatever they want to do, they have the opportunities to do that, and they don't have to go abroad and shine there while they can actually shine in Nigeria. The world has seen Nigeria as a very, very powerful country where reforms can be implemented. This is being recognized. I am at the IMF. I can tell you there are many, many other policymakers in many countries who do not just have the courage of doing what Nigeria is doing. There are countries where to increase fuel price at the pump, you need to wait 3 years and have increment increased by 15%, and they cannot even implement what is being done here. But as I mentioned early on, if these gains do not materialize directly into people's life, it's going to be very difficult for people to understand what the merits of this reform were and if they need to continue to support it. So very important to quickly transform the macro gains into micro gains. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Doctor, same question to you.
So, in conclusion, I think it's important to remember that policy is a human calculation. And because it's a human calculation, you must always answer a set of questions, especially with economics. What is the macro impact of my reforms? And this is important because when the government says it won on macro, it did, right? And we should celebrate it. However, you also have the meso impact. How is the impact of reforms on the structure of industry and its dynamics, right? Because that now determines whether externally those industries are attractive to FDI and investments. Then you have the micro reforms at the level of firm level performance in terms of can our firms because Minister Jumoke is going to go out and take Nigerian businesses to compete in the African market. Can our firms compete? How do I make sure that they are competitive? So you need the micro impacts on firm level performance to be very high and promote the resilience of Nigerian institutions and businesses to be able to compete. Then there are nano effects. Can households cope? What is the gap between where they are and the coping effect, and how do we close that gap? And of course, there are also wallet level effects. When the average Nigerian shows up in the market, to what degree is he able to survive? Now, all these impacts don't happen at once. In any true macroeconomic transformation story, the macro comes first. And that's why it's important that Nigerians celebrate the macro. The nano comes last, usually, which is where the pain point is. How do we coordinate to shorten the journey between the macro impact and the nano effect on a man's wallet, whilst cushioning the effect in the transition period, is the number one question that we must answer. And so there are two ways. One, we simultaneously scale job creation and productivity whilst expanding social investments and ensuring that social investments and social protection truly reaches Nigerians, and we can demonstrate it, including what the states are doing. Because sometimes the federal is doing stuff and being visible about it, but sometimes the state does not come along to show visibility on their own social protection transformation activities. So again, it's a human calculation that must have macro impact, meso impact, micro impact, and nano impact. And it's only when all these impacts align that the man on the street really starts to clap, but it takes time. So let's tell a story where we don't, demarket ourselves from saying it didn't happen, it did. But also we don't tell ourselves an incomplete story, that what we have done is the destination. It's not. We are on a journey so that we can go together and reach the furthest left behind Nigerian. That will make policy a real human calculation, and we all win. Thank you.
Thank you very much, distinguished panelists. Thank you for the depth that has been, shown here. The bold ideas definitely that have come through. The practical wisdom that have been shared today. I had a few things. Increase revenue, but be focused. It's a journey, it's not a destination. We must coalesce everything that we're doing from the macro to the meso, to the micro, to the nano level. Most importantly, we must be agile. The other thing is we are also part of the global world, so we must be quick to adapt. So thank you very much, distinguished panelists. Of course, your insights are more than just a conversation. They've been a call to action. And I'm also glad that majority of our policymakers are here. So everything said here will be taken along. So let's continue to challenge limits, I must say, reimagine possibilities, and that is why Mr. Oyedele brought us all here today, and drive the change that we want to see. That is my slogan every day on my program. The future isn't just ahead of us. The future is now, and it begins right now. Please, a round of applause for all our distinguished panelists. Honorable Minister of Industry, Trade and Investments, Dr. Jumoke Oduwale, MFR, Ms. Hadiza Bala Usman, the Special Advisor to the President on Policy and Coordination. Please, a round of applause, Dr. Christian Ebeke, IMF Chief in Nigeria, as well as Dr. Taiwo Aduloju, CEO, NESG. Thank you very much. It's been so nice doing this. Thank you. Okay, a picture.
Thank you very much. Let's put our hands together for the panel, please.
Thank you very much to all our panelists and to our excellent moderator for that panel session. They say pictures tell 1,000 words. However, videos, they tell the entire story. We would like to, at this point, watch a documentary on our fiscal reform journey.
In the heart of Africa's most populous nation, a bold transformation is unfolding, one that touches every household, every business, and the future of Nigeria's economy. This is the story of a bold journey to fix Nigeria's broken fiscal foundation. For decades, Nigeria's tax system was tangled in outdated laws and a web of overlapping taxes and multiplicity of collecting agencies.
It's always a problem for us to even get a grasp of what the system in itself is as a business person. I will tell you that the system we met, which is, of course, we call the tax system in Nigeria now, to us, it's more punitive. It's more like we want to punish you for doing well or for trying to put items together called business. And which, of course, sometimes it bothers us. Why would I be doing so much? And the establishment, now the government, would not even appreciate, but rather they will bring all kinds of tax laws and all that.
I think we are being overtaxed currently. In this government that everybody is struggling, I think that's too much, to be honest. So I don't know, maybe the federal government needs to work on it.
We pay the local government tax and the state tax, all kind of tax we pay it. When they came to collect the tax, we paid them and they give us paper as reference for payment.
Some taxes we are receiving.
I will teach the secondary school students how to get handworks. They will not be waiting for government to do something for them.
And even if you ask me to pay taxes, why should I pay a tax? Because these people, they are not doing anything with our taxes. This is one of the reasons why people even resist registering a business. You know, there's no willingness I've not seen anybody who willingly wants to pay their taxes.
The government is not supporting me in any way in my business. They pay for television, for radio. They pay for even to cover our shop from the rain.
So I want them to be active in their work. When I rent them money for something, let's say something I rent them money for, okay, I will benefit from money I'm paying.
I must say, as we speak now, we are using a generator. We are clearing the gutters ourselves. We are tarring the roads ourselves. We are digging the boreholes ourselves. All we know is that you walk in and say, pay tax.
You are talking about getting more taxes, aggregating it, making it so attractive to people to pay and all that. People will ask you again, the ones I paid last year, how was it used?
On day one, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu made a promise to fix the tax system and build a fairer, stronger economy.
I have a message for our investors, local and foreign. Our government shall review all the complaints about multiple taxation.
That promise became a plan. The Presidential Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms Committee was formed to simplify taxes, raise revenue fairly, and rebuild public trust.
The committee has been established to address the broad physical challenges facing our economy. Its mandate shall be divided into three broad areas. These are: 1. Fiscal governance. B. Tax reforms. And 3rd, growth facilitation. We should no longer tax investment or production, but focus on returns, incomes, and consumption. This government will tax the fruit, but not the seeds.
The task before us is substantial, yet pivotal. Our fiscal policies could benefit from better crafting, grounded in data and evidence, ensuring coherence and consistency. We need enhanced alignment with the modern economy and better coordination with monetary and other policies. Many of our existing laws are outdated, hence they require comprehensive updates to achieve harmonization and address multiplicity of taxes, remove the burden on the poor and vulnerable, while addressing the concerns of all investors, big and small.
This must not be just another talking shop. The steps that you are going to recommend, that you are going to agree amongst yourselves as the best for this nation, are eagerly anticipated, so that they too can be an important input into the regeneration.
Quick wins came shortly after. Some executive orders to provide relief and cushion the impact of subsidy removal and naira flotation, and new withholding tax regulation to ease tax burden and cash flow strain on businesses, both large and small. The Economic Stabilization Bill was introduced to harmonize taxes and set the stage for critical reforms, followed by 4 major tax reform bills. But change is never easy. The tax reform bills were greeted with debates, controversies, heated media activities, and some doses of misinformation. The conversations grew louder and sometimes divisive.
The Council acknowledged that the country is underperforming on all indices as it regards yields from major revenue sources, also our tax to GDP ratio, and so on. So after extensive deliberation, NEC noted the need for sufficient alignment between and amongst the stakeholders for the proposed reforms.
We are saying that we think